There is a photograph taken in Borneo in 2019 that shows something impossible. An orangutan high in the canopy, frozen mid-climb. Below, in the understory, a chimpanzee, watching. That photograph was taken 3 months before the first orangutan disappeared. Chimpanzees are not native to Borneo. They were brought there, released, introduced as part of a private rehabilitation effort that went silent 6 months after it began. And for 3 years, nothing unusual was reported. The orangutans continued their solitary lives. The chimpanzees formed small, observable groups. Both species occupied different layers of the forest, different rhythms, different worlds, until the watching started. No one called it hunting at first. It was described as curiosity, proximity, cohabitation, stress. But photographs don't lie about posture. And in that image, the chimpanzee is not curious. It is waiting. Before we go further, leave a comment. Tell us what city, what country you're watching from. We want to know where this story travels. The forest had absorbed them easily. 15 chimpanzees, 7 males, 8 females, released into a protected zone on the western edge of a lowland rainforest reserve where no chimpanzees had ever lived. The logic was humanitarian. The animals had been confiscated from illegal trade. They could not be returned to Africa. Borneo had space. Borneo had canopy. Borneo had fruit. The initial reports were optimistic. The chimpanzees built nests. They foraged in predictable patterns. They avoided the deeper forest and kept to secondary growth where the canopy was broken and movement was easy. They were monitored remotely by camera traps and occasional foot surveys. No aggression, no territorial expansion, no contact with the orangutan population that lived 3 kilometers deeper into the reserve. For 30 months, the two populations remained separate. Orangutans are solitary. Adult males occupy vast overlapping ranges. Females move slowly with their young. They do not form groups. They do not coordinate. They do not fight collectively. Their entire evolutionary strategy is built on distance, patience, and the avoidance of conflict. Chimpanzees are the opposite. They live in fission-fusion societies. Alliances shift daily. Males patrol borders. They cooperate. They plan. They remember. They share information across time and space in ways that still are not fully understood. But in Borneo, there were no borders to patrol. There were no neighboring chimpanzee groups, no rivals, no threat. The forest gave them everything they needed: figs, termites, leaves, water. And so they stayed small, visible, manageable, until the dry season of the 3rd year. That was when the fruit began to fail in the secondary growth, and the chimpanzees, for the first time, moved deeper into the old forest, where the orangutans lived alone. The first incident was recorded by a camera trap on the 19th of September. An adult female orangutan, approximately 20 years old, descended from her nest earlier than usual. The footage shows her moving through the middle canopy, slowly, checking fruiting trees. Normal behavior. She pauses, reaches for a branch, and then stops. She is looking down. The camera angle does not capture what she sees, but her posture changes. Her body flattens against the trunk. She remains motionless for 11 minutes, then she climbs. Quickly, higher than orangutans typically go during midday heat. She does not come down for 6 hours. The researchers noted the behavior but did not flag it. Orangutans are cautious animals. They freeze when they detect sun bears, pythons, or humans. The assumption was predator avoidance, standard stress response. 3 days later, another camera captured something more specific. 2 male chimpanzees moving together through the understory stopped beneath a tree where a juvenile orangutan was feeding. They did not vocalize. They did not display. They simply positioned themselves on opposite sides of the trunk and waited. The juvenile stopped eating. For 40 minutes, no one moved. Then the chimpanzees left. Together. in the same direction they had come. The orangutan remained in the tree until after dark. Again, the data was logged. Again, no alarm. Chimpanzees are curious. Juveniles are inexperienced. Proximity does not equal predation. But the pattern had begun. Over the next 6 weeks, 5 more orangutans were observed altering their behavior in the presence of chimpanzees. They climbed higher. They stopped vocalizing. They abandoned feeding trees before they were finished. One adult female was seen moving at night, which had never been recorded in this population. The chimpanzees, meanwhile, were traveling farther. Their range had expanded by 40%. They were no longer confined to secondary forest. They moved in pairs, sometimes trios. They passed beneath orangutan nests without stopping. But they always looked up, and the orangutans always noticed. The research team discussed it in November. The consensus was behavioral plasticity. Both species were adjusting to shared space. No physical contact had occurred, no injuries, no deaths. It was considered a success. The monitoring continued as planned. Remote. Minimal intervention. The cameras kept recording. And in December, the first orangutan disappeared. Her name, in the field notes, was female 12. She was an adult, estimated at 28 years old, with a dependent juvenile approximately 4 years old. Her range was well documented. 17 camera traps had captured her over the previous 3 years. She nested in the same grove of ironwood trees. She followed a predictable route between 3 feeding zones. She was, by orangutan standards, highly visible. On December 4th, she appeared on camera for the last time. She was traveling west, moving through the lower canopy with her juvenile clinging to her side. The footage is brief, 18 seconds. She passes through the frame, normal gait, normal posture. She does not look down, but behind her, barely visible in the corner of the frame, there is movement in the understory. Low, deliberate, pacing her. She was expected to appear on the next camera 3 hours later. She did not. She did not appear the following day, or the day after. Her juvenile was found alone on December 9th, clinging to a branch in a tree 2 kilometers outside her mother's range, underweight, dehydrated, uninjured. The juvenile survived. Female 12 was never seen again. The team expanded their search. They checked every camera in her known range. They hiked the trails. They looked for remains, for evidence of predation by clouded leopards or crocodiles. Nothing. Orangutans do not simply vanish. But there was no body, no blood, no signs of struggle. The report classified it as an unexplained disappearance. Possible illness. Possible fall. The juvenile's survival suggested the mother had placed it intentionally, which implied awareness, intent, some final act of care. It was filed. The season continued. And then female 7 disappeared. 18 days later. Same zone. Same pattern. She was recorded on camera at dawn. She did not appear again. Her juvenile was found alone 4 days later. Alive. This time the team reviewed all the footage more carefully. They went back weeks. And they found it. Chimpanzees beneath her trees. Chimpanzees along her routes. Not every day, not obviously following, but present, repeatedly, in positions that made no sense for foraging. Chimpanzees do not feed where orangutans feed. Their diets overlap, but their strategies do not. And yet, they were there, watching, waiting, moving on. The third disappearance came in January, male 6, a subadult, nearly independent, last seen on the 16th. Not seen again, no body, no juvenile, no evidence. But this time, the cameras caught something new. 12 hours after male 6 vanished, a group of 4 chimpanzees was recorded traveling together in tight formation, moving quickly, not foraging, not vocalizing, just moving. One of them was carrying something. The footage is distant. The object is dark, irregular, approximately the size of a forearm. It is visible for less than 3 seconds before the group moves out of frame. The researcher who reviewed the footage noted it. and then noted the location. It was exactly where male 6 had last been seen. The cameras were repositioned. Monitoring shifted from passive observation to active tracking. The team placed additional units along the boundary where chimpanzee range overlapped with orangutan territory. They began daily patrols. They documented every sighting, every movement, every interaction. What they found was not random. The chimpanzees were not expanding their range in search of food. Fruit availability had returned to normal levels after the dry season. There was no resource pressure, no ecological reason for them to be in the deep forest. But they kept going, and they were not going as a single group anymore. They had split. 2 males would travel north. 3 others would move east. They did not stay together. They did not vocalize to maintain contact, but their movements were synchronized. When one group stopped, the others stopped. When one changed direction, the others adjusted. It looked like coordination. It looked like strategy. The research team resisted the conclusion. Chimpanzees hunt. This is known. They hunt colobus monkeys, bush babies, small antelope. They hunt cooperatively. They drive prey into ambushes. They share meat. But they do not hunt orangutans. Orangutans are larger, stronger. They have no evolutionary relationship with chimpanzees. They do not exist in the same landscapes naturally. There is no precedent, no template, no learned behavior passed down through generations. And yet, on February 3rd, cameras captured 6 chimpanzees surrounding a single tree. The tree contained an adult female orangutan and her infant. The chimpanzees did not climb. They simply remained, spread in a loose perimeter, not moving, not feeding, just there. The orangutan did not come down. She stayed in the canopy for 2 days. On the 3rd day, the chimpanzees were gone. The orangutan descended. She was recorded drinking from a stream. She appeared exhausted, disoriented. She survived, but her behavior had changed. She no longer moved during the day. She nested earlier. She avoided open canopy. She stopped using her primary feeding trees. Other orangutans began doing the same. The team mapped it. 12 individuals in the overlap zone had altered their movement patterns. They were traveling less, feeding less, occupying smaller, more concealed ranges. They were not being killed. They were being displaced, pushed out of their own territory by presence alone, by persistence, by the constant, quiet pressure of being watched. This was not predation. This was something else. The chimpanzees had discovered that orangutans could be controlled, that they would retreat, that they would starve themselves, exhaust themselves, abandon their young rather than confront a coordinated threat. And the chimpanzees did not need to be aggressive. They only needed to be there, day after day, tree after tree, until the orangutans had nowhere left to go. The killing, when it was finally recorded, was not sudden. It took place over 9 hours. An adult male orangutan, designated male 3, had been tracked for 4 days by a coalition of 5 chimpanzees. He was crossing between 2 sections of forest where the canopy was broken. A fire had cleared a corridor years earlier, and regrowth was still sparse. To move through it, he had to descend. The chimpanzees were waiting. They did not charge. They did not display. They approached slowly, from multiple directions, cutting off each line of retreat. Male 3 climbed a dead tree, approximately 15 meters tall. Too thin for sustained weight. No canopy connection. No escape route. The chimpanzees surrounded the base, and they stayed. For the first 3 hours, male 3 remained motionless. His breathing was visible on the camera footage. Deep, controlled. He was conserving energy, waiting for an opening. There was none. At hour 4, one chimpanzee climbed partway up the trunk, not to attack, just to occupy space, to remove the option of descent. Male 3 shifted higher. The branch bent. He gripped tighter. The chimpanzee descended. They took turns. Every 40 minutes, a different individual would climb. Never far, never threatening. Just enough to prevent rest, to maintain pressure. Male 3 began to vocalize. Long calls, distress signals. Orangutans do not call for help. They are solitary. But he called anyway. No one responded. At hour 7, he tried to descend. He made it 4 meters before the nearest chimpanzee moved into position. Male 3 stopped, reversed, climbed again. His movements were slower now. At hour 8, he fell, not from an attack, from exhaustion. His grip failed. He dropped 5 meters and caught himself on a lower branch. The impact was audible on the recording. He hung there, one-armed, breathing in short, rapid bursts. The chimpanzees closed in. They did not bite immediately. They grabbed, pulled, held him down. He struggled, but his strength was gone. One chimpanzee pinned his arm, another his leg. A third gripped his throat. It took 11 minutes. The footage is clinical. No sound except wind and the rustle of leaves. The orangutan stopped moving. The chimpanzees did not stop. They continued for another 20 minutes, biting, tearing, not feeding, not consuming, just dismantling. When they were finished, they sat near the body for an hour, not guarding it, not eating it, just sitting. Then they left, together, in the direction they had come. The body remained where it was. Cameras recorded it for 3 days. Insects came. Decomposition began. No scavengers touched it. On the 4th day, researchers retrieved what was left for necropsy. The findings were unambiguous. Cause of death: asphyxiation and trauma consistent with sustained restraint by multiple attackers. No defensive wounds, no evidence of predation, no consumption of tissue. This was not hunting. This was execution. The orangutan population stopped moving. Within 3 weeks of the documented killing, camera traps recorded a 47% decrease in orangutan activity across the overlap zone. Individuals that had been visible daily were no longer appearing. Nests were being built lower, deeper in dense cover, in locations that made feeding difficult. 2 females abandoned their juveniles. This is not orangutan behavior. Females invest years in their offspring. They do not separate voluntarily. But the juveniles were found alone, too young to survive independently, clinging to branches in areas their mothers never used. Both died within a week. The chimpanzees, meanwhile, had expanded their range by another 30%. They were no longer moving in small groups. The entire community traveled together now. 15 individuals in loose formation spread across 200 meters of forest, moving slowly, deliberately, checking every tree. They were not foraging. Figs were abundant. The forest was full. But they passed fruiting trees without stopping. They ignored termite mounds. They drank quickly and moved on. They were searching, and the orangutans had nowhere to hide. The reserve was not infinite. To the west, farmland. To the east, a river too wide to cross. To the north, degraded forest with no canopy. The orangutans had compressed into a smaller and smaller area, and the chimpanzees simply followed. By March, the population density in the core zone had doubled. Orangutans that had never overlapped were now occupying adjacent trees. Stress levels were visible. Aggression between individuals increased. Females with infants were pushed into marginal habitat. Food became competition. Space became conflict. The system was collapsing, not from violence, from pressure. The researchers requested intervention, translocation of the chimpanzee population, immediate removal. But the reserve was privately managed. The original rehabilitation organization had dissolved. Legal ownership of the land was contested. Permits took time. Approvals required committees. The cameras kept recording. On March 22nd, another orangutan disappeared. Female 9. No body recovered. On April 5th, 2 more, male 8 and female 14. No bodies, no evidence. just absence. The team stopped conducting foot patrols. It was no longer safe. Chimpanzees had begun responding to human presence with displays. Branch shaking, charging. No contact, but intent was clear. The forest had become theirs. By May, only 6 orangutans were still being recorded in the overlap zone. All adults, all solitary, all moving at night. The rest had either died or fled into areas where camera coverage did not reach. The final footage was recorded on May 18th. An adult female, unidentified, climbing through dense canopy in near darkness. Moving quickly, erratically, she stops, looks down. The camera angle shifts with wind, and below her, barely visible, shapes in the understory. Multiple, stationary, watching. She does not move again. The camera recorded for 6 more hours. She remained in the tree. The shapes remained below, and then the footage ends. The reserve was closed to researchers in June. Legal disputes over land management had stalled all operations. Camera traps were left in place, but no longer monitored in real time. Data retrieval was suspended indefinitely. The chimpanzees remained. The orangutans, those that survived, were presumed to have dispersed into unprotected forest outside the reserve boundaries. No follow-up study was ever conducted. The footage still exists. Thousands of hours. Archived but not analyzed. The research team published a single preliminary report describing interspecies behavioral conflict and resource competition. The killings were mentioned briefly, described as isolated incidents, anomalous. The word hunting was never used. There were proposals for removal, for relocation, for controlled management. None were implemented. Funding was not available. Political will was not present. The forest was remote. The animals were not endangered as species. The situation was classified as low priority. 3 years later, a journalist attempted to visit the site. Access was denied. The reserve had been sold. New ownership, private conservation, no public entry, no interviews. A local guide, speaking off record, said the chimpanzees were still there. He said the orangutans were not. He said the forest had gone quiet, that the long calls had stopped, that the canopy no longer moved the way it used to. He said people from the villages no longer entered that section of forest, that there were stories now, not scientific, just stories. He did not elaborate. If you found this worth your time, consider subscribing. There are other stories, other systems, other collapses that no one talks about. The camera traps are still there, still recording. No one is watching.